Welcome to the Hospitality Maverick podcast, Nisha. It's a big pleasure to be here in Water Street, Liverpool, in one of your restaurants, to have this conversation about Mowgli and much, much more.
No, it's good to have you here. Thanks for coming all the way up.
Oh, it's a pleasure. There was other reasons to be as well, but I'm very pleased that you had a little hour for us to talk about what's going on in Mowgli. So, just briefly, I think a lot of people know what Mowgli is. You've been quite around in the media recently, and a lot of good things happening, opening sites. But if people don't know what Mowgli is, can you just give it like a bit of a background story?
Yeah, Mowgli is the way that Indians eat at home. That's it. So she's simply an Indian home kitchen. She's not the ultimate. We're not everybody's cup of tea. If you come from a different area of India to me, you will hate me. And you'll hate what she serves. So that's all she is. But I, for 20 years, I have been a child protection barrister. Nothing to do with food, nothing to do with hospitality. I had no concept of business. In fact, I was raised to have nothing but disdain for business, which is dreadful. And would certainly never have thought of hospitality or restaurants as somewhere that I would want to go and want to be involved in as a woman, because if you look at the way that hospitality is portrayed very often in the media, it is the psychopathic testosterone slathered kitchens full of aggression. And which is a real shame, because what I've discovered is it's the most magnanimous, graceful profession, and I gave up a brilliant profession to come to this one, and my mission is to encourage others to join this profession. So Mowgli, in terms of how she started, if you're an immigrant, you're obsessed by food. Very, very generally, that's the case. So I was born and raised in India, and I was born in Ormskirk in the northwest of England. Two parents who were doctors. But we were always obsessed with food. As we finish one meal, you're thinking of what the next meal is. And also, it's one of those very few links that you still have to your heritage. So we've come to a completely English area. And my earliest memories were of the most horrendous racism, bricks through windows. And that was my earliest memory, actually. And being firebombed and stoned on the way to school, that was just the way life was. But we very typically used food to try and win people over. We just wanted people to like us as a family, and we would feed the neighbourhood. And that's how it started. And I saw not just how delicious this food is, but how absolutely addictive and how it won people over. And then you grow up, and I was a barrister, and I eat out a lot. That's what barristers do. We eat out a lot. In fact, part of our training is dining. You've got to eat 40 dinners to be able to become a barrister. It's really interesting. And I saw that the way that Indian food was represented on the high street was something that was unrecognisable to me. It's lovely and it has its place, but it's unrecognisable. Very often in the Indian home kitchen, it's vegan, it's light, it's fresh. And in being all of those things, I think we as Indians are almost ashamed to bring it to the market, because we look at you and we think you are the rich West. What you want is big chunks of meat in a thick sauce, Henry VIII-esque. You don't want lentils and spinach poached with potatoes. Yep. Exactly. And so that's why we kept it to ourselves. And Mowgli became this living idea. And I had a brilliant salary and a brilliant prospect at the bar to become a judge. And this living thing, and this is the bane of many entrepreneurs, honestly used to keep me awake. And it was the last thing I wanted to do. But this thought came to me that if I'm addicted to this food, and I feel so strongly that people should know about the way Indians eat at home, because I also taught Indian food for about 15 years, Indian cooking, then why not try and take it to the market? And that's how Mowgli started, and that was just 4.5 years ago.
Oh, it's gone fast then. Do you know how many sites today?
Oh, well, we just signed our 9th site, we'll be 12 at the end of the year, but I'm 8 now, 8 sites trading now.
And where was it that you signed
I've just signed Bristol
20 minutes ago.
20 minutes ago. I'm so glad you were here for that, Bristol. And it's such a big, because I handpick every site, I negotiate every single land deal, every one of honestly, it's to me emotionally less than buying a house. These places become my home. These places become the home that I will house my children in, my staff. It's the most important thing. It's so exciting. And suddenly you're going into another city that you can make a difference in. It's been a great morning.
And it was a great pleasure to be part of that. You call it she. That's very interesting. And I've been here a couple of times before. First time I was here, I came in and I was just here on a business travel, and I thought, what is this around the corner? What's happening here? And then I went in and there was this guy grabbing me. You need some food, don't you? I said, yeah, of course I do that. And then I could find out very quickly there's something special going on here. And then I started following you, and I could really feel there was a different culture. And now you also talk about she. It would be quite interesting. What do you mean about that? She has a personality? Mowgli?
Honestly, it is like a living entity, and I think you will find this with lots of entrepreneurs. When they have this idea, it becomes a living thing, almost with a mind and a will of its own. It's crazy, and it's almost as though it's begging you to give birth to it. So in my mind, it's always been this animated thing. I also think this thing, Mowgli, it's almost, you personify her, is bigger than I could ever be, better than I could ever be. She's doing more. She's cleverer in what she's doing for, the cities that she goes to than I could ever be. It's really interesting. It's like an organic thing, and it gives you, I only ever work in Mowgli. I don't sit in head office ever. So I work in a restaurant every single day. I eat in Mowgli twice a day. And just being here and watching my staff animate her, because that's the bottom line. I come up with the idea, I design it, and then the face and hands of this creature are my staff. They are the face, they are the hands. I'd have nothing without them. And you watch them, and you watch the way that they interact, and you watch the way that the clients come in and give her a new life, and then you get these other ideas about, suddenly it's as though this thing speaks to you. So I sit in the corner of a restaurant every single day, and something will come to my mind. I'll watch, a member of staff looking a bit sad or a bit sullen, and then you think, oh my gosh, this is an unhappy child. What can I do? What can I do to make her life better? So I honestly think of it as this living thing, which is incredible. It's not inanimate in any way in my mind.
So it's gone incredible fast, you would say, like from a restaurant opening point of view. You've done almost 9 sites then when you're in Bristol in, 5.5 years?
Yeah, we will be, when we open Bristol, we will be 5 years.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So how's that journey been? Also, you coming from a totally different trade as a barrister, how that entry into the hospitality been, and then speeding up in that way and doing it that fast. There's many that will maybe be in the trade for 20 years only opening one site. How's that journey been?
Very easy and very pleasurable and completely easy underfoot. And I think it's the way that you philosophize about these things. I don't believe the world owes me a living just because I had a good idea, or had an idea. You put it out there, and fortuitously, thank God, 3 weeks in and we had queues around the block, and that hasn't abated. I built this on the basis of social media. I do all the social media. Every interaction that you have with Mowgli is actually me. So I start that at 8 in the morning, I finish that at 2 in the morning. I respond to every single tweet, Instagram post, every single comment. So what you feel is whether you're wanted or not, whether you're rubbish or not, because you get that instant feedback from your clients. And when you know that actually people do want you in Bristol, so the reason I only go to cities where people call for us. So at the moment there's lots of calls for Newcastle, at Leeds and Glasgow. Those are the big ones that people are shouting, really, I'm getting tweets every day about that. And that gives you kind of a confidence. So it's not hubris that you're growing with. It's not because of that. It's because we're actually being called to go there. And then we open and we trade the way that we need to trade. So there's no anxiety on my part. In terms of how easy or not it's been, Mowgli's interesting. These, and I think we're different and probably inferior to most other restaurants in that these are my dishes. If you come to my house, I will cook the dishes that you have in Mowgli. There's a handful of dishes on the menu. Well, it's a short menu relatively. And I have been addicted to this food, as have my ancestors, for hundreds of years. I've eaten this food day in, day out for 50 years. I have not tired of it. And so I'm not going to change the menu. And when you stop changing the menu, the variables reduce. Everything is locked down. It just makes it very easy to grow and to scale it up, because I tell my chefs, when you create my house chicken curry, it's like creating paracetamol. There is a spec down to the microgram. You do not mess with it. If somebody comes in and it doesn't taste exactly as it does in Oxford, they won't come back to us, because you want that consistency. And when you have your teams understanding that really empirical nature of how you create the food, then scaling is very, very simple. You're not doing battles with egos in the kitchen. They're very happy to work from a space. We have a document, basically. that if you had never worked in a kitchen before, you'd walk into Mowgli and it would say, right, take this spoon, switch this light on, stand in this position, take this pan, put this much oil in the bottom of the pan and this many seeds. Do you know what I mean? It's simple. And that's what makes scaling quite a pleasure, actually.
Coming bigger back to the food, because it's interesting when you said that there was no representation of the Indian cuisine on the high street. You can see there's definitely a wave of that happening. You have like Friends Dishoom doing it. You have the chili pickle in Brighton that has 2 units now. Do you think there's now a more openness to the Indian food in general, or do you think actually it's driven by the whole plant-based movement, the vegan movement as well? Because it's the Indian kitchen is amazing when it comes to that.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
I think that's just, and the gluten-free and vegan, those are just incidental benefits to this cuisine. Do you know what the truth is? I think that Britain was always open to how Indians really eat. I think Indians, the problem was with us is that we just thought, we are not going to show you what we do with the Savoy cabbage. We'd rather give you the meat in the thick sauce that you want. It's that humility. Honestly, I know, because what happens in an Indian home, so my mother, when we had visitors over, we'd get meat. Otherwise, you wouldn't get meat. You would get potato curry, cabbage curry, dal, chapatis. You wouldn't even get rice. You'd get the most humble, and it was the most delicious food. But as soon as somebody white walks in the door, she'd go to the freezer and get some chicken out. And that English person would not want that. They want dal. Do you know, they want dal and cabbage. I think England, it's a funny thing, I think Britain, because of their history, because of the empire, is possibly one of the most open-minded nations in the world when it comes to the way that the world eats. Yeah. And it might be because of the the empire, they were exposed to these flavors. It might be that there's no chip on the shoulder when it comes to English cuisine. They don't, we've made no headway Indian food in France, in America, across Europe. We are very, very underrepresented. But there is something about the British psyche that is uniquely open-minded, I think. I think if it's happening in some village in Peru, I think the British are interested in it, actually. So I think it was always the case that Britain wanted to know, wanted to taste this kind of food. But it was we, the Indians, that shackled ourselves. And now, because I'm second generation, so I'm sort of a brown English person. I'm just like you, although you're Danish, but it's true. And so I don't come with all of those anxieties I just come with this really open mind about what actually do I like to eat, what would I like to see represented on the high street. And that's, I'm sure, what Dishoom do, I'm sure that's what Chili Pickle do as well. And so it's simply that confidence that you have for being a second generation.
And I guess also that besides that the English food palette have just changed dramatically over the last 10 to 15 years with new things coming in. It's probably one of the most developed markets when it comes to restaurant from an infrastructure point of view compared to the rest of Europe. I guess that there's some countries that would struggle if they went to France or Spain, because there's a very specific way they want things and the way you want to eat. So coming a bit back to opening, because you probably get this question a lot, but London, you're thinking you're opening all these sites outside London, and people thinking, why is he not in London? Normally everything great starts in London. So what is the story and approach to that? Is that conscious? Is that because you were
very conscious? Yeah. London is, for me, for food, it's the best city in the world. I love it. I lived there. I cut my teeth in terms of food in London. I go to London just to eat because I like pretty, weird stuff. And I want, pig's ears in a Szechuan sauce. Then I go to Baoshan in Soho, and I need that fix. It's crazy, but I do. So London is the best city when it comes to food. I also think in terms of the restaurant fraternity, gosh, to not be in London, it hurts me because all my mates are down there. I love that, Kavi and Shamil, they're like my restaurant brothers. I love them. And they're down there, and I never see these people because I'm up here in Liverpool. That's where and you are very good to come and do this podcast up in Liverpool. But all my meetings need to be up here. If people want to meet and talk, they need to come up to Liverpool. And it's interesting. So you can feel real fear of missing out. You can feel, I don't know, like you're out of the fraternity. You also feel, I tell you, you feel a little bit embarrassed because people almost treat you as though you don't exist if you don't exist in London. I remember going to a very important FTSE 100 party at Claridge's, and you walk in on your own because you're only allowed on your own. And so these are all the big CEOs of all the big businesses, and there was cabinet in there, and I remember they'd say, so what do you, and mainly banking, lots of, huge companies, corporate, and they'd say, what do you do? And then you'd say, well, I've got restaurants, and suddenly you sort of drop in their opinion a bit, and then they'd say, oh, do you have any in London? And you'd say no, and it's as though you dropped off the face of the earth, and it's as though you're not in London because you wouldn't hack it, because you're not good enough. That's the subtext. I tell you, in my own little tiny paranoid mind, that's what you think people think. However, for the same size of site that I have in Liverpool or Preston or Leicester or Nottingham, I would pay possibly 8 times the rent in London. And as much as I'd like to be there, if I open one site in London, that's 2 sites outside of London that I cannot build. That's 70 jobs that I cannot create outside of London. And that's what I have to remember. Why am I not creating wealth? Why am I not creating jobs outside of London? Because what would often happen is many restaurants do this, they'd have a site in London that's being propped up by the rest of the estate because it's so expensive, look at the rents in Soho. So I have to be sensible about actually commercially what works. If I found the right site in London at the right price, I would love to be there. I'd love to be there. But I will never do that at the cost of 2 sites outside of London and creating that many jobs outside of London. And it hasn't done us any harm at all. It just hasn't. And the thing is, I think because I really want to be the voice of Indian food, because I'm a curry evangelist. I want Britain to be able to cook curry as well as, my relatives in Varanasi. So I've dedicated my life to writing books. I've got a YouTube channel. I do lots on TV now about Indian food. And I think because I've got that sort of slightly, that media profile that is national, so I'm on the BBC a lot, it to an extent fills the void. It's not as though we don't exist in people's minds in London. They can't eat our food. They'd have to go to Oxford to do that, or now Bristol.
I think it sounds very sensible, and I often think that some people think that all great things starts in London, but actually sometimes it's better to have something, again, profitability trumps everything, and you can open one site in London that kills the rest of your estate because there's many troubles that comes with besides site. Staffing is a different beast there, and so on and so on. So I think it sounds very sensible, and I'm not surprised about the story you tell. I've heard it from other founders as well. When you're not in London, you feel a bit outside. You do. Do you know what's really interesting though? When you look at, as we stare down the barrel of Brexit at the moment, what is the statistic in front of house in London? Is it 80 to 90% is European? Here, my entire estate, 22% is European. The rest are British. So it's Brexit has had absolutely no effect on our recruitment at all, which is an incredible thing. Yeah. And I know that would be quite different if I was in London, because my European friends in London are beggaring off back to Europe. They're not sticking around, and why would they? So there are many benefits, and I think I've just got to focus on that, because you're right, you can, and I think I've just not got to be hurt when people do sort of sneer at you because you're not here, and level at you the fact that you're not in London, or the allegation that you're not in London because you're not good enough, because you couldn't stand the competition, etc. I'm life's too short to try and prove a point. I'm not interested in rising to any challenges. I guess you set your own standards, because you talked a bit about, I've heard earlier, you talked a bit about when you open new sites, you will like it to be better than the previous site?
The best. Every new Mowgli we open, if it is not the best in the estate, then I should not be growing. So when I open a new Mowgli, it's got to be the one that you want to be in more than anything, and then I go back and I redo my old estate. You revamp it, you back solve the old estate. So that's the criteria that I impose upon myself, and if I'm not doing that, then I shouldn't be growing at all. I shouldn't. I've got another job that I could go back to. I'm not here just to snarl up the high street, honestly, because my most important, we as restaurateurs, we provide social capital to cities. It's really important. It's no small thing that I'm opening in Preston. I used to do lots of court work up in Preston as a barrister, and you'd finish at lunchtime and there's nowhere to eat. And Preston's a beautiful area around there, the Ribble Valley. It's a stunning place to live. I would have gone and lived there if there were decent restaurants. I will go and live where there is decent food. Do you know what I mean? We really provide the high street. We put lights on in the high street. And so, we must never forget that it's a really, really important thing. We don't just take sites and continue the demise of the high street. You take sites to make cities better.
I think you're absolutely right that restaurants has now become such an integral part of society. They actually determine tourism as well. People don't travel around for location anymore. You go to places for restaurant. You just said, I will go to London. People would travel to Copenhagen, where I'm from, to go to the best restaurant in the world. And that's what it has become. It's like a very important part of the economy, and it gives jobs and it builds young people's confidence. There's so many things that restaurant can do besides just running a restaurant and make profit. But also, what is the when we talk a bit about opening restaurants and growing, and that's all good. But what is the bigger purpose of Mowgli? What is she set out to do? Do you have like a big, hairy, audacious goal for where she ends and where she's complete her journey?
Do you know, it's the most important question and it's a question that I think every founder has got to ask themselves at the threshold of doing something. So I'm glad you do, because do you know what? Not many people would ever ask me that, and it means everything. So why does Mowgli exist? Why is she here? And she is here to do one thing, and that is to enrich lives in the cities that she goes to. She's not here just to give good curry. That if I don't do that, I need to get off the high street. Mowgli exists to enrich lives in the city she goes to, enrich primarily the lives of my staff. So if I post, which I will do today, about Bristol opening, what will happen is, and this is the most charming thing, parents will start to tag in their children, saying, go and work there, go and work there. Instagram and Facebook, parents will tag in their children. They don't talk to me, they talk to each other. That's the greatest accolade I could ever have, that your parents would want their children to come and work in Mowgli. I'm an Indian, I want my daughters to be doctors. Now I want my daughters to work in Mowgli. Do you know what I mean? That's the most incredible accolade that you could have. So one is to enrich the lives of my staff. Two, to enrich the lives of my clients by providing them with that, place to go, to make their city a better place. Give them decent food, decent price, make them feel healthy when they're finished eating. And thirdly, and this is becoming really very important, is enrich lives of my communities. So every single Mowgli has a house charity, a local house charity. And, we've given over, I think we're coming up towards £600,000 in our short life to local charities. Well, do you know that this is down to the staff as well? So I set up something called the Mowgli Trust. So I knew before I set up Mowgli, I knew that I wanted one of the pillars of my business to be charitable giving, because how dare I take up a place on the high street and not give something back as well? And also, and this is becoming the most critical aspect of it, my aim for all Mowgli staff is that they feel nourished, fulfilled and purposeful. They need to come into work, and this is beyond them serving curry. This is, they're having tough times at home with their parents, with their boyfriends, whatever. Work needs to be a place of solace. I need them to come in and be outward facing and to be fed spiritually, emotionally, physically. When you have a house charity, and we have a charity champion in each Mowgli, that they are constantly thinking about ways to raise for, etc. And they're constantly being taken around. So we very often because I've got a real heart for cancer charities, because the statistic in the northwest of England is 1 in 2 of us will have cancer. I expect my charities to co-parent with me. So they take my staff to the hospitals so they can see what they're raising for, which is it wigs for, chemo treatment? Is it a MRI machine or whatever? So they see the hospitals, they are made a fuss of by the, whichever charity it is. It's really important, and that makes them walk taller when they come to work. So that's why we exist, is to enrich lives, and the way that we do that is by just my mantra in Mowgli: everything we do, every decision we make, every human that we hire has to have 3 things: grace, intelligence and graft. That's the way that we do it: grace, intelligence and graft. Every interaction has to be filled with those 3 things. Graft, because the busier we're busy, and we need people that become alive more as they're busy. Intelligence, because intrinsically, it's complicated food. The anthropology, the geography, the socio-economic history of this food is something that our clients want to know about, and our staff have to be able to relay that. And grace, it's really important. I did a lot of domestic violence when I didn't do it, but I dealt with it. I'm not tall enough. And so I have a 0 tolerance policy on any kind of aggression, any kind of that kind of one-upmanship, lack of respect. In Mowgli, and so there has to be that grace that flows in every direction, and it's safe. It's a safe place for you to be very straight with us and tell us how you're feeling. And that not everyone's perfect. Of course, most people, everyone is flawed. Everyone will have bad days. Everyone will have a deficit in the way that they work. And if we can compensate for that and put you all together like a jigsaw that works beautifully, then we will do that.
This leads very perfectly to my next question I'm thinking about, because leadership, to bring this vision to life, to implement this vision in a restaurant setting must demand a very high standard of leadership. And you talked about something I don't hear often, but like creating a circle of safetyness for your people. So how do you do that in Mowgli, especially when you're growing? Because that's often getting the right people on board, and the right people on board and the wrong people off the bus. That's often
If you articulate what you feel and you're passionate about it, and I am, and I'm shameless. So I do all social, we don't have a PR department, we don't have any marketing, it's me, all of it is me. And I emote always on social media. I will tell people what I'm feeling, what I'm thinking, I'll put it out and ask their opinion on it. I'll tell them when it's bad, when it's good. And when you do that, you attract the right DNA anyway. So you attract the right people who are coming into your business. So we are like-minded in that way. But what's really important, actually, recently I've been talking to lots of CEOs. I've been meeting CEOs from hospitals and from hospices, NHS. And the reason I've been doing that is because I want to know how they motivate their staff. The NHS staff and nurses of terminally ill children in the charities that we support, how you keep them content and motivated is the most astonishing thing. And as a CEO, I realised that it is your primary focus, your culture, and keeping that alive and keeping it pruned and relevant and accessible and understandable is your absolute priority. And it's not just being able to articulate it. So my theory is, if my Lithuanian KP in Oxford if you interviewed him for a job and he couldn't tell you what the Mowgli culture is, it's no use. My culture is no use. So it's very simple. And my culture is that we want to enrich lives. It's as simple as that. And we do it with grace, intelligence and graft. That's enough for them to learn. But it's not enough for me just to think that they've learnt that. What I need to do is also, I need to know how every single member of my staff feels. I, CEO, need to know that. So I have round tables, all sites meetings every week. And I have my HR team tell me who the stars are in each site, who the people that are struggling a bit on each site, what the ambition, if there's someone with a particular ambition on each, it doesn't take long. Even if I get to 40 sites, what's that going to take? It's going to take 40 minutes. It's worth it, isn't it, once a week? So, I get to know that, Lucas in Birmingham wants, his KP really wants to be a head chef one day. It takes no time at all, but what I have to have is a good HR and operational infrastructure that goes out and gathers that information. So we have things called contentment assessments, where our GMs are tasked every month to sit down with every single member of staff, and they have a 10-minute meeting, 3 questions. Are you happy? If you're not happy, why are you not happy? And where do you want to be, and how can we get you there? That's what every single member of staff. So I have got KPs that have now become head chefs. Most of my GMs started as servers. So and they are earning more than junior doctors. This is a place to come and work and to stay. So my GMs are tasked with that, to report to HR, who report to me, and HR are then once a quarter doing the same exercise so that I can check that my GMs have got the same taste as I have, that they're doing their job properly. The most important part of my infrastructure are those contentment assessments, so I know what every human is thinking. And some of them might hate Mowgli, and I need to know what they might have somebody that's bullying them. They may feel that, as head office, we're not communicating with them enough. They don't hear from us enough. That's really important. That must never be the case. My other big job is to make sure there is zero distance between head office and my sites as they appear around the country. Zero distance. The fire's got to burn very bright.
Yeah, and I guess I know that from being in restaurant for many years, that's the biggest challenge, us and them. Getting into that situation as a head office and under restaurants. That's the biggest challenge every restaurant chain and CEO sees over time.
It's an interesting thing, because what I'm against is this sort of slightly inverse snobbery. It's really interesting because, somebody in head office said we shouldn't really call ourselves head office, should we call ourselves Tiffin Towers? And do you know, this is something that I'm teaching my own children. Everyone has got a boss. We need humility. I was a barrister. Your judge is your boss. The judges have the government as their boss. Everyone has a boss. There is no indictment in that at all. This craving for absolute in terms of nomenclature, equality, it's nonsense. Everyone's got, so I've got I've got a chair that I'm accountable to. Yeah, I've got a board that I'm accountable to. And it's right that we're humble enough to know that. So actually, I'm really quite ardent that, you know, there's not a problem with it being called head office. What is the problem is our attitude. If our attitude is not filled with love, and that is the word that I use, love has got to flow in every direction of Mowgli. It's got to start in head office. So we are there as vehicles to make their lives brilliant, to make their lives enriched, nourished and purposeful. That's what we're there for in head office. And there will be people, and there are, that shouldn't be in Mowgli because they get knackered when they graft. They don't want to be on their feet all day. Then we need you to go and find somewhere where you actually are going to have a more sedentary life. So we always part company well, but just the title head office, in that there is absolutely nothing pejorative. And I think people need to learn the humility, this business about, you know, you're not the boss of me. That's got to stop. Humility is really important.
And I guess it's important to know there's a boss, but it needs to be the right relationship with the boss. There needs to be that respect and trust within that.
Trust is everything. The reason that people want to work for companies or for people is because they trust them. And therefore, we have to be worthy of trust. I have to be worthy of trust. And if somebody doesn't trust me, they need to go, for their own dignity's sake, they need to go and find someone that they do trust. But I, therefore, every morning and every night have to slice my emotions and my intentions and my motivations and make sure that they are trustworthy, that they're conscionable and that they are trustworthy. You know, and being surrounded by people that are not in business, by not being obsessed with the bottom line. I have a really strong faith, and I just think if I'm doing the right thing with the right intentions, you know, with love at the heart of it, then the bottom line will come. And if there comes a point where I'm not supposed to be doing Mowgli anymore, she will be taken away from me, and I will start a donkey sanctuary or whatever, and I will be content. I don't grip onto her mercilessly. I have to just know that every morning I'm filled with joy at the prospect of working here, and what fills me with joy, honestly, is you love humans. And I think that's the most important thing in hospitality. Is that in my old job, that's what I did. Is I did humans, and I dealt with humans at the lowest point of their life, and you are counselling them, and you are negotiating them through they're having their children removed, or you're removing their children. It doesn't get any worse than that. You have to, at the heart of everything you are, love humans. And that's the DNA of Mowgli. And as long as we do that, then head office is an entirely fine title. And us being bosses is a good thing, because I'm going to bring people up to come and be bosses alongside me, people with the same DNA.
So we talked a bit about the people, the leadership. So how do you ensure, because we talked about this before we started the podcast, about how do we ensure that culture lives how does she lives in every side in the way she did in number one? Because this is something that's discussed across the industry. In every event you go to, we talk about, we have to put people first. It's the time we need to write that. There's nothing new in that. My mom did that back in the 70s and 80s. People always been the human relationship, and you just said the humility around that. But how do you do that? Because a lot of people think that's difficult. You know, we can scale recipes, we can scale property, we can scale, signs and logos, but the people bit is where they often hit the wall and where things goes really wrong.
Really interesting. And this is why things like this podcast are really important. And this isn't just zeitgeisty. Us as CEOs and setters of culture have to talk about it. We have to learn to articulate it, and we have to wax lyrical about it, and you never take your eye off the ball for a minute. So how do you so first of all, you've got to get culture to flow right the way through operations. Culture is not something that exists as some adjunct to the HR department. It's got to flow through operations. So my directive to my operations managers is that every interaction that you have with any member of staff at any point has got to be a reflection of our culture, which is this enriching this life? Am I exhibiting grace, intelligence and graft in this? So it's there demonstrated. We don't just come in and bark at people. We don't just come in and without, looking into somebody's eyes, don't just go and check the paperwork. It's about the humans. So they are seeing it demonstrated, but it is no small thing. I met the head of HR for the NHS for the region. Really, really interesting, fantastic people, because it's a very tricky job. And she was describing the culture, and she said there are 7 words that we use. And she started to list them, and by number 4 she'd sort of run out. She'd forgotten what the rest of them were. And I realised that unless you can have them in the fingertips, and unless you can wear them on your skull, when English is your 3rd language and you're working in the in the dishwashing section of a Mowgli, culture's no use. And that's why it's really important that you break your culture down into very simple words to enrich lives, and or grace, intelligence and graft, and they can learn that. And so at least when they're standing there and it's tough, they remember that what Mowgli's doing is enriching lives. We're not just there to wash pots and provide food. So one thing is that slight sort of education. They've just got to have that in their neural pathways. But it's also, when you're doing contentment assessments, when your main interaction with your bosses is one where they're actually saying to you, we want to grow you. How can we grow you? Are you happy? Are you sad? Why are you sad? There's your culture. That's this business about how can we make your life better.
And I think also just that you feel your boss is interested in that. I guess that 8 out of 10 would never get that question for their boss, because there's this weird I'm your boss manager relation. But actually, we talked a bit about earlier as well, relationship is everything. You don't leave the company, you leave your boss. And the relationship you didn't trust and respect in the end.
That's absolutely right. And what an indictment. So if somebody leaves us, people tend to leave us because they're going to go off to university to study something, and then I'm going to poach the hell of them back. So we've got people that go off to do teaching or microbiology, and I want them back in Mowgli. So, but if somebody left us because they thought we were unconscionable, by God, that would stop me in my tracks. That would be the ultimate indignity for me, the ultimate undoing, that people thought, you're unconscionable and that's why we're leaving, or you are. I was watching a documentary about Fortnum and Mason last night, and they were describing the way that this guy from Canada bought the company, and he came in, and when he came into the floor, everyone would be terrified. And he was known for ruling with this rod of iron. And that ruling with, it's a Game of Thrones things at the moment, isn't it? When you start opting for fear to be the thing that brings people in line, it is doomed. It's doomed, because you turn your back, because it's it's instigating the most dreadful emotions in humans. What you've got to do is nurture them so that they naturally come into work and they are at their happiest. And that's when beautiful things happen. That's when they put their arm around you and say, you look like you're hungry when you walk in, or, you were served by somebody yesterday that, cared. It's because that girl is happy when she came, or happened to be happy on that day when she comes in. I just need that to be every time, all the time. And that's like raising children.
The insane thing with Camilla that served me and Sean yesterday was that she was going to an exam this morning, and it was her last exam. But she said, wow, that's quiet, and you'd work today. Yeah, because that makes me ready for tomorrow. She almost said, wow, that's amazing. So she actually used this opportunity to go to work, actually, to be ready for exam.
Yeah,
today
that's
at 9 o'clock.
Incredible.
And she was doing the evening shift. And that's typical hospitality. That's the graft, as she came in before. Yeah. You need to be a grafter to survive. Yeah.
You need to feed off humans. There are 2 types of people, aren't there? They're the introverts and the extroverts. And the extroverts are the people that actually feed off contact with other humans. You need it. I mean, I'm needy. I love humans. I need to talk to humans. Yeah. And it's hiring people like that. So you actually get your energy from social situations. And it's just making sure that we spot when we've got the wrong people, and there are people that don't really want to do eye contact. Sometimes you have people that work behind the bar that will do everything they can to avoid looking at that door when it opens, because that's not their responsibility. I want Labradors, I want people, that's what I'm like, you're constantly fetching sticks to make people happier, and the minute that door goes, that's why I work in Mowgli. Every time that door goes, you just think, I cannot believe somebody's come in to eat my food that I cook at home, and they're going to drop their hard-earned cash for it. That's an incredible thing, and I need my staff to feel that same kind of Labrador dog-like thrill every time somebody walks through the door.
It's interesting you say there's different personality types. I worked through my career a lot with MBTI to understand who was the best manager for a site, but also how do you put the best team, who do you put back in house and who do you put front of house? Because you could be an introvert, you'll be brilliant in the back, and you will do that, following the recipes you were talking about for an operational consistency to the dot, because you can think, you can get your head down, but you would not be good in the customer facing role because you're just on your uncomfortable place all the time. So it's about finding out where can you boost people's energy the most, or performance boost them most in the role. So that's super interesting. You're thinking about that as well. What about operational? Because it takes a bit of a machine, they normally call it an operation, to run this, consistency you're talking about. How besides doing recipes and training the chefs really well, what else do you do to put in consistency? But the power of consistency is
power
essential.
of consistency. There are many things. So, for instance, in terms of human contentment, we've got the contentment assessments and close relationship. So our GMs we have a GM summit once a month where all the GMs come together. And they are tasked more and more with, really owning operations to really, and that's important, certainly certain types of elements of operations, because they need, if we need them to be more conscious of a certain part of the business, to give them responsibility for it and up their responsibility for it, does that naturally. So there is that. The big, I tell you, with Indian food, and there hasn't really been a national chain for, an Indian food, florid national chain for Indian food, and the reason is because the food is really complex. Hitherto, Indian restaurants have been dependent on Indian chefs, and therein lies the weakness, really. So I, on principle, take curry virgins, and always have. And the reason for that is because what happens is I'm from the Bengal, and we cook a certain way, and as a result I will never eat in an Indian restaurant because there are very few Bengali restaurants. So if I go to a Punjabi restaurant, their dal does not taste like my grandmother's dal, and so I do not like it. That's how small-minded we are. And similarly, if, some people from certain areas of India come to, and we always order dal. Dal is the big barometer. They'll come, and if it doesn't taste like their mother's hand or the grandmother's hand, it just doesn't sit well. So chefs are the same. If I went to work in an Indian restaurant, I would tamper with the dishes until they tasted like my heritage. So taking curry virgins means you get complete consistency, because I train them in the specs, train them in the philosophy. What I also have is an army of super tasters. Super tasters in Mowgli, we test them. So we do lots of blind testing with food, and there are certain nuanced flavours that I need to know that they can get. The other super tasters are people that have grown up in my home was a bit of a commune, that have grown up with my food, and super tasters go and do random massive food tastings in each site and score each dish out of X, and I get a full report as and when they're doing it with photographs of every dish. So we have this army of super tasters to make sure that everything is being cooked and presented absolutely to spec. So you have that kind of layer in relation to the product, in relation to place. Our restaurants, I have something called Mowgli Aesthetics Police map, because it's a big part. So we've got people, product, and place. So the people, we've got the contentment, essence, etc. Product, we've got super tasters. Place, we've got map. There are 4 map officers, but each site will also have their own map member of staff, and that could be a server that's just got a good eye for aesthetics. Each Mowgli, as you walk in, when you open a Mowgli restaurant up as the GM, you will have a catalogue, and it will have a photo of every wall and how it's meant to look. And MAP comes and checks, again, does random checks on all of those things. Is the grout clean in the bathrooms? Is there dust on top of the awnings? Are the ropes getting dusty? Are the swings getting low? Etc. And they come in with that clean eye. So there are all these diagnostic tools that I have. And then what happens is MAP produces a report, and some of the things the GM's got to fix. If there's a light bulb out. I mean, I really don't tolerate light bulbs out. There's laid back, but don't do that to me.
It sounds like my mom.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with light bulbs.
Yeah,
and toilets.
Yeah, well, do you know what? We have people come in and propose in Mowgli, and they have their birthday parties, and if you're spending your money to come and do that special thing in my restaurant, how dare I not clean the toilet, and how dare my light bulb be out above your table? That doesn't show that I love you, does it? No. So Matt produces a document that allocates these jobs to certain people. So this is the really important thing. It's that being able to completely categorically read every one of those pillars of your business, people, product, place, and audit it and do something about it within 2 weeks of you spotting a problem. That's my time scale. So MAP spots something, within 2 weeks I need somebody to have come in and repainted that wall, etc. It's that kind of thing.
So this is quite interesting, because this is as a ex-McDonald, this is the way McDonald's has built a lot of their systems as well. There's an audit trail behind. And then when we just talked about the other side of the business, the more emotional bit. So this is how you bring it to life. You actually make sure there's a system in place and consequences when she's not as she should be.
Exactly.
And then you bring it to it. So that's very interesting because many forgets that bit. They think they design systems, but they actually don't have a follow-up process. And again, it's the approach to how you follow up on things. I guess
that's the most important.
One thing is that you made a mistake,
Yeah.
but that's not going to really solve the problem as you go forward. How do you deal with that? Because I guess performance goes up and down.
It does.
In any
Well,
place.
that's where you need very clear. You know, people want to do a job. They're not coming in here to frustrate me. That's where you need to be very clear about timescales. So, for instance, with MAP, the timescale is 2 weeks. And if it's not 2 weeks, tell me why, and that's fine. But give me a deadline. I am a CEO obsessed with deadlines, not punitive deadlines, but, you know, so every single directive that I send out, and that's about 20 a day, I will say... So, for instance, I got a photo yesterday, and we've launched a new wrap. And I get a photo. Somebody tweeted
the Ruby wrap
and the
I had
monkey
that
wrap. Did you? How was it?
It was delicious.
Really?
I really enjoyed it.
That's very exciting to hear. But I got a photo of one, and it had whole. So instead of the red onions being sliced in half and then sliced, they were sliced whole. So it was a full circle of red onion that you're going to have to cut through the membrane in that. I don't want you to have to deal with the membrane of an onion. So I send a WhatsApp message to my operations chef and say I need you to go back across the entire estate, retrain them on the chopping of onions for the ruby wrap, make sure they all know it's half and then sliced. And I want you to confirm that you have done this within, say, 8 days, and give him a date. So it's never a case of just saying, I want you to go and sort this out. I have a date. I then diarise that date, so I know on the 24th of May I'm going to text Andy and make sure I've been retrained. Everyone's been retrained. Ideally, I want Andy to text me by then and say everyone's been retrained. So every edict that you send out has to have a deadline, and they need to know that these are not anodyne deadlines. As a CEO, the most important thing, and the most fatal thing for me, somebody, is if I have to check that they've done something. That should really never get, there comes a point in a nascent new business where you've got to do that a little bit to train them that in fact that's something that I should never have to do. It should never be the case that I have to check that you've done that and it's not been done. I have no problem if you haven't done it. That's not an issue. Just come back to me with a date that you will have done it by, so that I know by, and it could be 6 months hence. Yeah. And if you keep coming back with things 6 months hence, then you're going to be working somewhere else very quickly. But give me a reasonable date. I'm not a tyrant in that. But the point that you make is really very critical. Is it's all very well having these ideas and these passions and these these operational targets, but unless they are achieved, unless the people that you are passing them to are trustworthy harbingers of them, they are useless. And it's all to do with timing. It's all to do with somebody saying to me, yes, we can get that done by X.
And I guess that I always say that you set the standard. So if you don't set the standard, you cannot expect the rest of your organization to do that. And that's why, in my world, timelines. I'm very focused on timelines. That's where you trained at McDonald's. You've worked on time scales all the time, because that's where you do the incremental improvements. But of course, it has to be, measurable, specific, and achievable, and realistic, and all that. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, you need to be patient as well, mm-hmm. because I guess that's one of the biggest challenges I found as well, to be patient, because you are that step ahead all the time, I guess, with Mowgli, and you're bringing the people on that journey. So where did you get all your inspiration from? Because you inspire a lot of people. So who's your hero, and how do you get energy, and where do you go and seek new inspiration to move Mowgli forward?
There's different facets of inspiration. So in terms of food, I literally travel the world. I work so that I can earn enough money, and I always have, so that I can eat across the world. So for instance, I've just come back from 6 days in Cambodia, where literally I went to learn how they eat at home. That's my obsession. So I've been, to wherever, Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia, obviously India, all across Europe, Poland, Italy, Spain, to learn how people cook in their homes. So not restaurants. It's my obsession. Not restaurants, no, in their homes. I'm interested in restaurants. Don't interest me they interest me. I'll tell you what's really interesting is that in countries like Cambodia and Vietnam, it's very hard to if you are a barang or a foreigner, they will take you to a foreigner's restaurant. It's like India about 40 years ago. The only place you could go, restaurants were in hotels. They didn't have restaurants. Still, my Indian family call my restaurant a hotel. And so that wasn't, you're never exposed to how they eat. So in Cambodia, honestly, it was so hard to get into a home and find out how people are eating, which was really, really important. So that's what I do for food inspiration. In relation to leadership styles, somebody that had a big impact on me, I only met him a couple of times, was Tim Bacon. You may not know him, Ventures. But he was someone that was overtly affectionate with his staff. And I'm not talking in a Harvey Weinstein kind of way. I'm talking about he truly spoke in a loving way to his staff, but he was also known for knowing what he wants and getting it done. And he built Living Ventures, his part with Jeremy Roberts built Living Ventures. But I saw that you can, because when you're not part of the business world, your image of businessmen are J.R. Ewing. You've got to be this psychopathic ball breaker, and to see CEOs demonstrate care and love, it's a really, for me as the human that I am, that's what I want to see. So that was somebody that was a great inspiration for me. The interesting thing is, and this partly comes from the fact that I'm in Liverpool building it my own way, is I've just got to build it my own way. But remember, I'm nearly 50 now, and I think the job that I did, where it was all about humans, it was about bringing out the best of those humans that are about to give evidence in a case where literally they can barely breathe because they're so broken. It's all about bringing out the best in humans, and so it's what I did in my last job, I think, that's inspired me to try and run this business in the same kind of way.
So that's very inspiring, by the way. On the end of the podcast, we always ask the people on if they could give one advice to leaders in the industry on how they could either improve themselves or become a better version of themselves. What would your advice be to them? First of all, you come from the outside. You have a very different view on how hospitality should be done, but also leadership. What would be your one advice? You probably have many, but the one advice.
Well, honestly, because I'm new to it, and there's only really, you can only really have one guiding star. You can only have one guiding star, and everything else will come. So I have faith that if I do what is best for my staff, the bottom line will come. If I have happy staff, content, fulfilled, purposeful staff, the bottom line will come. And that is my focus as the CEO, and it's a strange focus, isn't it? I remember speaking to the CEO of one of the charities we support, and he said, we've got no shortage of passion in this business, but if I take my eye off culture for 5 minutes and go to fundraising, when I come back, the nurses' needs are above the finance department, above the HR department, above estates, etc. You have to keep your eye as your CEO on culture. Never forget that. And the culture is the way your humans on the floor feel, because they are the face and hands of your business. You're only as good as that last service. You're only as good as that last dish. If you've got a happy chef and a joyful front of house, then people will just come back and come back and come back, and your business will float into the future.
Absolutely amazing advice. I couldn't agree more. People first and boost your business. So, in general, what we talked about is all about people, the love for people, food, and guests you invite in to your home or restaurant.
Yeah.
Then you become a successful business.
That's exactly it, and that's the word, isn't it? Is that for me, it's just a home. It's an Indian home kitchen, but every decision I make is as though I'm doing it for my home. I design every Mowgli, choose every Mowgli, and then you want to populate it with family, don't you?
Thank you very much, Nisha, for coming on the Hospitality
Mavericks
podcast. Hopefully see you in the near future again here on the podcast.
You'll be bored of what I say, but what can she possibly talk for an hour? Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nisha.
Okay.